So here I'm going to go to Image, Variables, Datasets, Import, and select a file. So now I have to browse my system for the data file, and make sure you change your filter over to CSV, and there's the zombie data. So I'll load that up and hit OK. And so here's where it gets challenging. If you make any mistakes, Photoshop basically says there is a problem somewhere, but it does not tell you what it is. So here it says we cannot parse the data file. There were too many variables in the first line of the text file. So that means my file has more columns than what I've defined. So what we have to do is we have to make sure that we've mapped up all the columns that we've listed here. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 variables defined. So if we go back and look at variables and define, here I can see we must have forgotten to map up ID and special, because we have image, defense, attack, life, and name with variables attached to them. So for ID, we want to replace that with ID, and for special, we want to replace that with special. Okay, now let's try to load in that data file again. So I'm going to import, select the file, go to CSV, select the file, load it up, and hit OK. And okay, here's the next challenge. Could not parse the file. The name image is not a variable. So remember earlier in the tutorial I said I had the casing wrong? Well, basically I need to resave the file because my variable is looking for uppercase image, but the file actually contains the first case image with everything else lowercase. So all I have to do to fix that one is basically go back to my data file. I've already fixed it. It used to be lowercase image, now it's uppercase image. So I'm going to save this as a CSV file. Go back to my data, hit that, hit save, and overwrite. And again, like I said earlier, Photoshop doesn't like it if you have the file open, so make sure you hit File and Close. Okay, so now import. Okay, and finally we have our data. Yay! So now we're going to hit OK. So there's no changes yet, but what you can do is you can go to Image, Apply Datasets, and now you can see all your glorious cards. So there's 25 rows, so you have 25 datasets. So if I select a different one, I'll go down further in the line. Number 20 is Zombie Boss, and you can see the numbers change. And then here, Spitter Zombie attacks with Vomit Attack. So you can easily make all these different cards. So now we've got our basic framework set up. One more tip. When you go to Image and Apply Datasets, if you actually apply this, it becomes permanent. And so that large rectangle that you had drawn now will take the form of a zombie. And so when you apply datasets again, you'll have fewer pixels to replace with, and it kind of messes things up. So what I would suggest is never actually applying the changes unless you are comfortable and know what you're doing and have done it for a while. Because otherwise what will happen is, let's say you apply changes with this zombie, and then later on you add another zombie who's maybe overweight or something. Basically, the overweight zombie has to now fit into this zombie's frame because you've trimmed the number of pixels. So again, it's a kind of common mistake I find myself doing all the time. So if you notice that you hit apply, just undo the changes. That way you get your full region back. So now let's say we want a more advanced thing, like let's say we want a red border versus a black border or something like that. So right now we have a background that's just white. So let's set up a couple more backgrounds. Let's say red background. And actually I don't think all we need is red, just to show how true or false variables work. So I'll make a dark red background. There we go. So it's either on or off. And so all we have to do to make that work per card, let's say we want the bosses to have a red background. We'll go back to our data file, zombie data, and let's do red background. And this will be a true or false statement. So by default, everybody is false. And you literally have to use the words true or false, all uppercase. So everyone is false, except for our bosses. Our bosses, we're going to say is true. There we go. Oh, hey, there we go. So now, what am I doing? Now I can save this. Save it as a CSV file. CSV, zombie, data, tutorial, save. Yes, yes, yes. Now close your file. Save, save, and reopen your original. Alright, so now we have that extra column. Now if I was to re-import that data, again it's going to crash and say we have more columns than mapping, so we need to define red background. So what I'm going to do is go back to here. Let's call this layer red background. And then let's go to image, variables, define. And we're going to use this visibility, and it's going to be based on the value of red background. So basically what we're saying is if the value of red background is true, this layer is going to be visible. If it's false, it's not going to be visible. So when I hit OK, now I can load in the data file. So image, variables, datasets, import, and hit OK. Everything worked great. Hit OK, and now let's see our results. Zombie boss, there it is. So these layers, of course, they could be textured, and you can also have multiple checkboxes and those kind of things. So just for complexity's sake, let me show you what I've done with other games, such as Epic Tower Defense. So let me go back a directory. I'll go into Epic Tower Defense, 2nd edition, look at my docs, and go to Epic Tower Defense 2.1. So this is Epic Tower Defense's data. If we look at invader data, we have an ID, a name, what wave number and gate number they come out. Is it a troop or is it a vehicle? So depending, each one of these has a different icon associated with it, and so this toggles on or off the appropriate icon. These are the background colors, so this toggles on one of many different background colors. Here's its life, damage, and value, and its special rules. So pretty simple. Tower data. Here's all the tower data, so the name, the position code, all the cost information, whether it's normal, advanced, or epic. This makes the border silver, red, or gold. Is it special? Whether it basically has that star or whether it has the tower icon. The number of cooldown ice cubes to show. So basically on my file, I either have 1 cube or 2 cubes, and then that toggles them on, and then special rules. And then there's other stuff in there as well, but I'll leave those out. And so that's basically how we did Epic Tower Defense. So now, once you have your data, now you want to actually make files out of it. So basically what you can do, instead of applying and then saving each one of them manually, you can go to File, Export, and export each data set as a file. So here, I choose where I want to output those files. And so here I'll typically go to my directory, so active games, zombie tutorial, and here I made a directory called renders. So this is where I keep all my output. And again, you don't have to do this, I'm just recommending best practices. Hit OK, and basically the file, it's going to be named after the dataset name, which is the first column in the file. So since my first column is its ID, the file, as an example, is going to be called 1.psd. So when I hit OK, it's basically kicking out all 25 datasets as .psd files. And then after we do that, we're going to convert those PSD files to JPEGs. So now it's done, and let's take a look at the directory. So zombies, renders, there's all my 25 PSD files. If we open one up at random, there's my spitter zombie. So now let's make them into useful JPEGs. So here I'm going to go to File, Script, and Image Processor. And so here I point the image processor at where to go. So I'm going to go down to Zombie Tutorial and Renders. And then I'm going to just save it in the same location as a JPEG. That's 11 quality. You could do 12, but it's really the difference between 11 and 12 is almost visible, but there's a big file size difference. So I would recommend 10 or 11 really. You can also do TIFF, which is almost non-compressed at all. But JPEG is really going to do you well, and especially for GameCraft, they need JPEGs. And you can run a scripted action as you're doing it. However, I think that Photoshop is pretty buggy. Every time I've tried it, it's corrupted my images. So if you need to do scripted actions, I recommend doing the batch option later. And if you're kind of a power user, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I might get into that in a different tutorial. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and run it. And now basically it's opening up each one of my Photoshop files, converting it to a JPEG, and then saving it out. So if I actually go into Windows, I can watch it work. So it's up to 14 of them so far. There's 15 and so forth. And so once you've rendered out all your cards, you can then upload them to GameCrafter, print it out, and then maybe a week later you'll actually have this whole deck in your hand. I think that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Hope it made sense. And if you have any questions or you're hitting any problems, definitely let me know. I've probably hit them all because I've been doing this for a while. And if I have any requests, I might make a second tutorial that shows you kind of power user things. For example, you can have one spreadsheet that generates one level of images and then import those images into a larger one. So with the upcoming game Emperor's Arena, for example, I have one one spreadsheet that generates all skill images, and then there's a larger template that chooses which skill images to load and places it on the larger sheet. So basically, you can kind of do recursive data rendering to really manage all of your data and not have to manually manipulate anything. And that's pretty much all my cards, and that ends the tutorial. So hope this was helpful, and definitely give me an email if you have any questions. Thank you, and have a good one.